Sorry, all running a little late today.
Hey, Michael, we're ready and recording whenever you're ready to get started. Let me check for a quorum right quick. Charles, Mark, Rudy. Let's see. Let me pause my screen right quick.
It looks like we have council members and the mayor with us. And
Hey, Mike, this is John.
hey, John.
Yeah, hello, how are you doing?
Couldn't be better.
Am I supposed to do something different than simply call?
No, John, that's it. I would just ask that you mute yourself when you're not speaking and then unmute yourself when you're speaking or when you'd like to speak recognized, because I can't see you on the dashboard because you've called in. But it's a pretty simple matter.
I'm looking for a mute button. I don't see one. Ah, okay, got it.
Okay.
I'm trying to get my bearings here. I don't see Terry. Alfonso, okay. Charles. Mark. Wanda. Looks like we've got everybody but Terry. No. Dr. Browning. Sylvia.
Looks like we've got everybody minus Dr. Browning and let's see, Charles, Mark, Michael.
I don't see Terry there. Have we heard anything from them?
Have not. Terry's your alternate. So.
I don't see Charles going.
Oh yeah, I don't see Charles either.
So John is on phone. No, yes. Mr. Carmona is on. Michael is on. No, yes. No.
All right. Shall we jump into it? We do have a quorum, right?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I'm a little disorganized this afternoon. I dashed in the door like 5 minutes ago.
I feel ya.
Meeting ran over at the office and I kept thinking, I got to get out of here. It's pretty hard to cut off your client. Could you stop talking? I got to go now. Anyway, awkward.
So we also, the auditors are also on. So whenever we're ready to turn it over to them, I'm going to hand over the control so they can share the audit in their screen.
All right, well, why don't we call the meeting to order then? I show that it's 6:06. We'll jump right into citizen comments. Do you have any of those? Hearing none, unless there's any objection by the committee members, what I'd like to do is allow our auditors to kick off, and that would free them up, and then we can pick up at liaison. Would that be okay with everybody? Anybody opposed to that?
That's great.
You good, Wanda?
I'm good.
All right. Sylvia, with that then, we'll go ahead and move to
The auditor. Okay.
Yeah, number 5.
Yes.
I can barely see that.
So Joe, I'm going to unmute you and I'm also going to make you a presenter.
Very good. Okay.
We still have a couple of microphones unmuted. If you guys could mute up Phil, if you can mute yours.
Can you see Can you all see the draft?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Well, very good. Thank you all for giving us a moment to share or to go through the audit with you. This is a draft of the financial statement audit. It's substantially, well, it's complete. Pending your review and any comments or suggestions or changes that you have, we anticipate this to be the final version with a couple minor exceptions, and I'll I'll discuss that as we go through the draft. So this is the audit of the financial statements as of September 30th, 2019, and for the year that ended. The financial report that you have here is accompanied by a table of contents that will refer you to various sections of the audit. I'm not going to go through each of these. I assume you've all been provided a draft for you to look over, and you probably have questions, and we can refer to those as we go along. But
Yes.
for purposes of keeping this, as short and sweet as possible, I'm going to focus my presentation primarily on the management's discussion and analysis, and I might refer to some of the other footnotes and schedules within the report, but the management's discussion and analysis is kind of going to be the focal point because it kind of brings everything together at an aggregated level and kind of gives you a better picture overall of the government-wide financial statements and results of operations. So before I get into that, though, I just want to mention two things. First, this is a two-part audit. We audit the financial statements and we issue a report called the Independent Auditor's Report on the financial statements. So that's one piece of the audit. The other piece of the audit is what's called our Yellow Book piece of the audit. And we issue another report way back down here. It's our Independent Auditor's Report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters based on an audit of financial statements performed in accordance with government auditing standards. So that audit is what's commonly referred to as a Yellow Book audit. And there are certain procedures that we perform as part of the audit to be able to issue that report. Now, this first report, the report on the financial statements, is basically the part you're probably most interested in is the opinion. And so we came in and we performed a review of internal controls, not for purposes of relying on those controls to reduce our testing, but mostly just to gain an understanding of how the controls are working. And we didn't really test controls. That isn't contemplated in a financial statement audit like this. That would be a separate engagement. Furthermore, this reflects the internal control structure that was in effect, pretty much around the balance sheet date back in September. And so you can probably imagine that since then we've had a lot going on with COVID-19, and there have been some changes in what we're doing, perhaps due to funding concerns that could potentially have an adverse effect on on controls. And so I'll touch on that a little bit later and give you my thoughts on some things to consider as we're going through this COVID-19 crisis. But that said, based on our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the government activities, the business type activities in each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of the city as of September 30th, 2019, and the respective changes in financial position and where applicable cash flows thereof as of and for the year ended in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. That's kind of a long way of saying this was a clean audit. We call it an unmodified or a modified, or sorry, an unmodified opinion, which is kind of, there's like 4 or 5 different opinions we issue on audits like these, and this is what's considered probably the basic, most common opinion that is issued. So that is the report on financial statements. Now the report on the Yellow Book procedures comes down here at the end. So we perform, there's some internal control work that we do over financial reporting. What we're doing when we're looking for we're looking at internal controls, we're trying to identify significant deficiencies and material weaknesses in the internal control structure. So as we go out there, we perform the audit, we perform what's called walkthrough procedures. So we walk through critical control processes and try to identify those critical control points where if there are a breakdown in controls, those critical control points would be where we would see a potential significant deficiency or material weakness. So for example, a critical control point in a cash disbursement process would be failure to obtain adequate review of invoices for approval prior to writing the check and paying the bill. So for example, if there was not evidence of that type of an approval, that would be what we would consider potentially a significant deficiency or material weakness in internal controls. Now, we performed our procedures and we did not identify, based on our work, we did not identify any deficiencies in internal control that we considered to be material weaknesses. However, material weaknesses may exist that have not been identified. Furthermore, as it relates to compliance with laws and regulations, we did not identify, the results of our test disclose no instances of noncompliance or other matters that are required to be reported under government auditing standards. Now, that isn't to say there aren't compliance deficiencies. There very well could be. They're just not ones that fall within the scope of government auditing standards. So that is the result of our audit. Now, going back up to the top, we're going to start here with the MD&A, Management's Discussion and Analysis. The Management's Discussion and Analysis it's the required supplementary information that you as a city government are required to prepare and to accompany your financial statements and audit report. This is something that is prepared by you, but we assist you in helping you put it together. But it's from management. That's why it's called the Management's Discussion and Analysis. So it'll discuss various financial highlights and overview of the different funds and so forth. But I'm going to scroll here to the place that I want to spend the next few minutes. So this is the these are the government-wide financial statements at an aggregated level. You'll find in the financial statements sections after the MD&A the details of the 2019 governmental activities, business type activities, and the component unit that's brought in. You can see by looking at this that our total assets were 50,106,467, up from about 447 million last year. And the main reason for that increase is right here in capital assets. We have about $8 million of construction in progress. During the year, there was about $2 million, or roughly $2 million in construction in progress additions that accounts for that increase. And most of that construction in progress related to the facilities that were constructed. Now, it's all in construction in progress as of September 30th, 2019. And, it wasn't, I guess it wasn't technically placed in service until right after that. So we have it showing there. So next year, when these financial statements are prepared and presented, the capital assets will show the, here, I'll show you. So here's the capital assets. Oh, these are the business type activities. Let's look at this one. Here are the capital assets. So in construction in progress, we had 8.5 million. Now about 8.1 million of that is actually the buildings there that have been placed in service. The rest of it is other construction in progress. But during the year, we added about $2 million in additions. Now this year, this will now become part of buildings and improvements. It'll all be allocated primarily to buildings and improvements and probably this category right here. So next year it'll look a little bit different. You'll see a transfer between this category and this category.
Yeah.
And all of it was paid for with cash. So there's no debt encumbered against it. Sorry, I lost my way here. Okay. All right. If you look down further, we have another asset here called a deferred pension related outflow. This is a Gatsby required financial statement line item that represents the utilization or the consumption, I guess is probably a better term. It represents the consumption of net position as it relates to the retirement plan, the pension plan. And we don't show it as an asset per se, even though it's kind of up here below liabilities, but it's a deferred outflow. And so in this case, these items are specifically what they relate to these are differences between projected and actual investment earnings on pensions and contributions made to the pension plan based on actuarial valuation. So we get these numbers directly from TMRS, and they compute these. They have their number crunchers and actuaries compute these numbers, and so we have to incorporate that into the audit. So that would include this number right here, and within this number is about $1.2 million or $1.1 million of pension liability that has been accrued per TMRS. And then here's this one right here, which represents your health and your health plan, OPEB. And so anyway, just so you understand, these are numbers that are not, they don't relate to your investments that the city has in their own accounts. It's all outside the control and access of the city. Then down below here, this is your equity section, and it's broken out into 3 parts. There's invested in capital assets, net of related debt, only there isn't any debt. We probably ought to take that out because it's misleading. It's really just capital assets. You'll notice right up here, there's your capital assets. Here's your capital assets. It's the same number. Then you have your restricted assets, which those represent, let's see here, those are discussed on page 52. Let me show you those. On page 52 of the footnotes, right here. So there's the restricted asset. It represents street maintenance, assets, police activities, school zone safety, green sales taxes, tourism. Those are all restricted for those specific purposes by outside third parties. And so the balance of your equity is it is unrestricted, and gosh, right here. So the balance is at least in the government funds, 5.6 million is unrestricted. There's about 5.3 million in the business type activities that's unrestricted. So your total unrestricted net assets are 10 million, restricted is 8.1, and the fixed assets are 29 million. So total assets, net assets of 48,347,000. The component unit is, I guess it's just getting started, had a little bit of activity in the year before, represents some cash, and it's all restricted. The changes in net position, your income statements, your governmental activities, we had about 7 million this year. Last year we had about 7 million, about the same. The business type activities had about 1.1 million, about the same as the prior year. So overall revenues hung in there about the same, a little bit higher. Your expenses were 5.9 million compared to last year. It looks like they're down slightly, but they're broken out by primary government, public safety, public services, and improvement programs. Again, in the financial statements that follow, you can get a breakout of all these numbers. But here you can see everything compared to the prior year. You'll notice that they look fairly consistent from year to year. So everything drops down to net income or net increase, $2.2 million. There were some transfers that came in. Overall, the change in net position was 2.7 million. Compared to last year, it was about 2.2 million. And that's how we come to our $48 million in net position. All right. One thing I want to draw your attention to on page 18 This is the these are the balance sheets on your governmental funds, and these are presented on a modified accrual basis. So they're listed by general fund, then you have your special revenue funds, and then if you were to open these financials up, you'd see this side, green sales tax funds, city facility funds. So your total governmental funds were 14 million. Then there were these accrual adjustments that are required to be made to bring it to your the amount that agrees to the statement that I showed you previously. The thing I wanted to draw your attention to is in the city facilities funds, we have a deficit here. A deficit. It looks like we did not have enough funds in there, or we didn't transfer enough funds to cover those excess spending amounts. And yeah, I would highly recommend that you do some kind of a transfer. If it hasn't already been done, maybe it has. Regime might be able to chime in on this, but it's possible that that was put in after the end of the year. Our recommendation would be that that be handled and taken care of before the end of the fiscal year so that you can eliminate these deficits. Overall, no material effect on the financial statements as a whole. It's a timing issue, but that's just something we would recommend that you consider going forward. Okay, let me just run through at the back some items of interest, perhaps. This is required supplementary information. It's the budget and actual comparison. And what you're required to present is the original budget in your general fund compared to your final budget. And in most cases, they're the same. It looks like there was some amendments. And then we have the actual amounts reconciled to the GAAP basis right here. So you'll notice that the total revenues on a budgetary basis actually came in a little bit higher than what was budgeted. And the expenses came in quite a bit lower than what was budgeted. And a lot of it has to do with this item right here, public services, were the costs were not as high as what was anticipated, and it could be having something to do with timing, I'm assuming. But down here on the street repair replacement fund, you'll notice that the expenses were about $83,000, but the budget was $1 million. And the reason there's this big difference was because, and what we would recommend in the future is that these funds, it represents capital assets that were transferred out of the street repair and replacement fund and over into the general fund. So it's not that the expenses weren't incurred, they were, but they were just transferred. We would recommend going forward in the future that when you have those transfers, that you also amend your budget, update it so you don't have these large differences. You'll notice that's the case here as well in the green sales tax fund. And that's just a basic accounting policy recommendation. Nothing we would consider to be significant or material to the financial statements that would require us to report on it. But just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Can I interrupt here, please?
Yes.
This is Regine, by the way. So
Hey,
is this where you transfer the CIP projects out of there and move them to those? Because projects in the street fund are not paid for, projects in the general fund are not paid for in the street fund, by the street fund. So I don't want that to be they budget a whole lot for projects in the street fund, but then if they don't happen, the money's not spent.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not quite sure which one you're talking about there.
That I misunderstood. I was, okay. Well, thank you, Regine, for bringing that up, because I'm glad you clarified that point. In that case, it's not an issue. You just underspent your budget. So
yeah, definitely in the street and the green tax, those things are budgeted, and then if they don't happen, the money's unlike the general fund where we take the money, where we spend the money, and then y'all take it from the expense and move it to the CIP. That's a different thing.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify that part.
That's okay, and I appreciate that. Let's see. I think that's everything on the financial statements. Does anybody have any questions?
I have one more comment before we move ahead, if I can.
You bet.
The $112,000 in the city facility funds, there are transfers that were done in early of this fiscal year that covers that. The expenses that were coded to September but not paid until late October, so the transfer doesn't show up until in this fiscal year. So that is something that has been addressed, and next year we'll have to work better on getting those expenses in before that time passes. But that's why that shows up as a $112,000 deficit.
Okay. I figured that was the case, and I think you'd mentioned that when we talked. So I think that's good that you brought that up. Okay, a couple other things that I wanted to bring up in closing, and this is something, I don't know, Beth, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Beth might want to chime in here because she's more familiar with the specifics of how this happened. We would like to recommend that to make it easier on yourselves, and it would also make it a little easier for the audit as well, but that when capital outlay costs are incurred, like capital asset additions are incurred, we'd like you to consider recording those to a capital outlay account, with GL, as opposed to multiple separate GL accounts in the future. We feel that this will help you guys identify capital asset additions more efficiently, and it'll also maybe help you with your budgeting as well. We can do it as part of the budgeting process. Anyway, that's just something that we recommend. Beth, I don't know, do you have anything to add to that?
When you're doing your budgetary process, I can understand where you want a little transparency looking at the capital outlay account. So maybe adding a supplementary schedule that details what makes up that capital outlay total amount would be helpful.
Yeah.
John, do you have something that we can incorporate if we're gonna essentially adopt this and send it on to council at some point, making that part of our recommendation? Do you have some language for that on what you guys want to see?
Yeah, we'll put together some language for you so that it's easy, and And yeah, we'll go ahead and do that for you.
Okay. Regine?
Michael?
Yes,
So John and Elizabeth had talked to me about this a little bit earlier, and I was explaining to him that this is actually perfect timing. You know, we have a new budget process going on and a new accountant coming in. So this couldn't be at a better time to do something like that and, you know, to change it and make that change, you know, during this process. So I think that's a good idea.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. Again, this isn't. We don't consider the way you're doing it to be a control deficiency at all. So it's really more of a recommendation, an efficiency type of a recommendation. I think that would be helpful to you, and it would help with the audit process.
Okay, good. Well, if it adds clarity and helps centralize numbers instead of them being, we've often struggled with little pieces here and there and having that holistic picture. So anything, I think the committee would be in agreement, unless there's others that feel differently, that if we can do anything to enhance the quality of that, that would be a good thing.
Yeah. Very good. Hey, and another little comment, a little plug here. I mentioned earlier that you know, a lot of businesses, a lot of organizations that we audit are struggling right now with COVID-19 as a result of loss of revenues, and there is opportunity when things go south for problems to occur, and I just want you to be on your guard. And the reason I say that is the first thing that usually is cut when these things happen is the accounting department and other areas of administrative, you know, necessity. We're just saying be careful. Your system of internal controls, you can pare things down. Just make sure that you have other compensating controls in place to make sure that nothing is slipping through the cracks. We don't want that to happen. Not that it is, but just be aware of that, be on your guard, because those types of control deficiencies can give rise to opportunities and rationalizations and you know, incentives for employees to, you know, commit fraud and stuff. So we don't want that. We don't want that to happen in light of these circumstances. So keep that in mind.
Thank you, John. Good counsel.
Another thing you need to be aware of, and I think I mentioned this last year in our last year audit. The Gatsby, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, is always issuing pronouncements. They do it all the time, several a year. But there's one that's anticipated to be pretty pervasive and significant that's coming up, and it's called Gatsby 87, and it relates to leases. Now, before COVID-19 happened,
Oh, yeah.
this was going to have to be implemented this next year that you're going into, starting October 1st. And so now COVID-19 happened, and they postponed the implementation for you guys one more year. So you got a little bit of time here to worry about it. But essentially, what this standard now is going to require is if you have any leasing transactions that are considered short term or long term, you have to capitalize those. You have to put them on the balance sheet now. You have to show a lease liability and a corresponding right to use asset. And then you would amortize those over the term of the lease. And the way you measure that is you have to use the discounted future cash flows relating to that lease to capitalize that. So it's, if you're accustomed to expensing lease expenses, you won't be able to do that anymore on any leases that extend beyond a year. And you got to be real careful about short-term leases, because even if it's considered a month-to-month lease, but you're going to have it for more than a year, under the standard, that's still considered a long-term lease. So you can't just write it off that way. And the types of leases that are going to be specific to you guys potentially would be any buildings that you're leasing, if you are, any land that you're leasing, any vehicles, any equipment. We would recommend that between now and the date of implementation, that you do a search and identify all of your lease transactions. Some of them may apply, some of them may not fall within the scope, but if you come up with all of them, you can, at least we can figure out which ones will fall under the standard and which ones weren't, and then we'll be that much more ready to comply. And then when it comes time to implement it, we'll be able to advise you, I guess, on implementation. So that's my presentation. Do you all have any questions?
Question from anyone?
Yep.
Yes,
We have Councilmember Rosengarten has her hand up.
Rudy?
So my question is, this was very hard to follow with you moving around so fast. So just to give everybody an idea of how he went from page 15 to 89 to 19 to 23 to 56, back to 23 to 69 to 23 to 24 to 35 to 75 to 76. And we're expected to follow along. That was pretty tough. My question is, when you get into the pages, because in the past we would get a booklet and you could see all the headings on the left side, and then it continued across the spreadsheet to the right side. You can't see the headings when you go to page 2. So for instance, if you're on trying to find a page, it's usually later in the booklet. Could we, when this comes to council, could you simply insert the spreadsheet itself? Thus, we can move the cursor on the bottom left to right and see all the headings for that line item.
John, can you get books to the council member?
Are you okay? So here's what
Page 14.
When we've gone out there in the past, we've had the hard copy bound version. Basically, you can open it up and it kind of opens up like a book, and you can see all the funds across the 2 pages. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And here you can't, and we don't want a hard copy. I just would like to be able to see it just like seeing it in a book. So if there was a way to just insert an Excel spreadsheet page with that information already done, but we can scroll left to right and see all the headings.
I see.
Page 15 of the document is an example.
The document's actually a Word document that has Excel tables into it, but it is, you're right, it's supported by Excel. So yeah, I mean, we could do that. We can do that in the future.
Because when you go to page 16, there's absolutely no headings there. So you have to keep scrolling back, look at the headings, then scroll forward, and then understand what you're looking at. Okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying, and I would agree.
Could you also give everybody an example of a fiduciary account and a proprietary account?
What was the question?
Could you give everybody an example of a fiduciary account and a proprietary fund. I should say fund.
Yeah. The proprietary fund is an enterprise fund. It's basically the utility.
The
It,
utility.
it acts like a for-profit
Yep.
entity. Now, the fiduciary fund,
Would that be like the TMRS retirement account?
no. TMRS is a separate entity, actually. I mean, the funds are going into a separate legal entity, but there are certain liabilities associated with that funding requirements that are obligations of the city that they have to fund it. So they give us the data points we need to put in here to accrue those liabilities. So no, you won't ever see the assets of the retirement plan on the books. But as far as the fiduciary accounts, Beth, do we have any fiduciary? I can't.
The city of Sunset Valley currently fiduciary.
So there's the proprietary.
So fiduciary, no accounts.
Utilities.
Correct.
I could swear in the documents it referred to the TMRS account as a fiduciary account.
Yeah, no, TMRS is its own entity,
And
and it holds the assets much like a trust. So it wouldn't be consolidated in with.
Okay, next question I had is for everybody's computer, it's page 25, but for the document itself, it's page 11.
Page 25.
Your computer is counting your pages, and that would be 25 of 90. But if you're looking at the actual pages, it is page 11.
11, okay. Yeah, gotcha.
All right. So you come down, there's the bullet points. It says, going to the top, there you go. Changes in net position. It says then on the fourth bullet point, the business type expenses for the utility fund were funded mostly by charges for utility service except for $690. Is that a typo? $690 or $690,000 of net expenses? Because I can't believe we only had $690 of net expenses.
Yeah, let's see here.
I mean, I like that, but
Yeah,
I'm going to double check it.
let me find that financial statement. Hold on just a second.
While he's looking at that, everybody look at bullet number 3. Expenses for all business type activities this year were $1,280,424, which is a decrease of $297,898, or approximately 18.9% as compared to the prior year. This is the utilities, the wastewater, the solid waste, a decrease. That's great.
Yeah. I'm going to have to look into that 690 number. I'm not seeing that in here. You may be right. It might be a typo, but I don't even see. No, Beth, was that one of the items? No, I don't know. I'll have to look at it and see what that is. That's probably. I'll look at it and see what it is.
Okay.
I don't have that off the top of my head right now, and I don't have it
There should be the proprietary fund in the booklet towards the back. It should
Yeah.
find the page quick enough to talk about it before everybody falls asleep.
Yeah. Oh, I know what it is. It is 690. What
It's
that is that is a liability that is due from between funds. And you look on page 22.
all right. Page 22 of the booklet.
Of the booklet. Yeah.
Got it? I'm there.
So on page 22, it's this number, but there is anyway, Beth, I asked you about this earlier today, and I can't remember what your answer was. There was like $100 difference.
If you just scroll up just a little bit more, there's a line called due from other funds for $140.
Beth, are you on a computer or a mic? Because you're very muffled and we can't understand a word you're saying.
Sorry, dear. I'm on the computer. I'll try and speak up so you can hear me better. If you scroll up just a little bit more, there's a line called due from other funds for $140.
Here we
You
are.
net those two items together.
That's what that is. Okay.
So you add 140 and 790 together?
Yeah, you net them.
Yes, you net them. So it's 790 minus the 140 because 140 is considered an asset.
Okay.
So the net liability is 650. So that's what that was saying.
650. 650, we go back. And it's 690. The number I was questioning was 690.
It should be 650. So we'll make that change.
Okay. Looking for my page so I can make a note on that.
There was the proprietary fund reference.
Yep.
Yeah, this should be 650.
Okay, so I'm changing that.
So if I'm understanding, John, so we've got one change to that, and then we have the reference to the capital assets and outlays.
Yeah, there's one other minor change. I'm glad you brought that up. I need to mention. There's one other minor change right back here at the back. We need to put in. We have a budget for the component unit. We need to get in here. That would be the last change. I think we just got that today, didn't we? I think, wait, Jimmy, didn't you send it to us today? Or did we already have it?
Yes. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
So yes, that was something I failed to send them originally because it's that crime control district budget that's really not in our budget book. So that was sent to them today. It's just got the revenue and the transfers out. So
John, can you
shouldn't
point
be too
to
much of a change.
what changes on this page?
Right here?
Where all the blanks are. Got it. I want to highlight that for me. Okay.
The budget numbers are going to be put in there.
Got it.
So then
And Rudy, that's the one where it'll just be the revenue and then the transfers out because that all got transferred to the city facilities project.
Got it.
Okay.
Reggie, you have down the different changes.
I have one more thing.
Hello? Hello?
So,
Hang on, Alfonso.
Okay.
Go ahead, Reggie.
so there was a in the pension deal, there was the word fiduciary was used, but not in a fund sense. Hold on, I lost my,
Yeah.
yeah, the word was used, but not as a fund. So just like Rudy had said, she'd seen it in there, and that was the only place I saw it.
Okay. Very
Hey,
good.
Terry, can you hear me? You guys hear me okay?
Yeah,
So
we can hear you.
most people are choosing not to show themselves, so it's just Terry and I. It's going to be much more difficult for me to recognize you if you want to speak. So either put yourself on the screen or use the little hand option on the side. Otherwise, we're all going to start talking over each other. All right. So, Regine, did you get all the different changes? The 650 and then the crime control, the capital assets and outlay, coming up with the verbiage from that. John said he'd give you some language for that.
Yeah, we'll get some for you on that.
Okay.
And we'll also, we'll get that for you.
Okay.
Regine, we can't hear you. So
Oh, I'm sorry, I was muted. Yes, I have all that.
Okay. So there was just those three items. The lease issues for next year.
No, it's actually been, because of COVID-19, it's been pushed back one more year. So it'll be the year beginning October 1st, 2021.
Okay. So that won't affect us this year on this particular one. I think the only thing that's there is the sign. Don't we do a lease back on the sign or something, Regine? Isn't that the only lease we have?
So we don't have any land, but we do lease the copiers,
Oh, okay.
the postage machine, that sign, the parking lot, and rental storage building. But I think we might be getting rid of that one at some point. Well, no, we won't, because we'll have arts commission. But those are the only leases we have. We don't have no buildings, no cars, no anything like that.
Okay.
John, can I ask a question about that real quick?
Yeah.
What if you paid the lease for the whole year? That wouldn't save you from having to do anything special, would it? Because you'd still have to pay the next year's too. Never mind. Answer my own question.
Yeah, it's still a lease.
Yeah.
Alfonso?
Okay. I only have some recommendations for John and comments. But my question is, when they were looking this for internal controls and they tried to find deficiencies, and he mentioned one example that they didn't found any failure to obtain adequate review for invoices. Do they make interviews to the employees?
John?
I'm sorry. Repeat the last part of the question again.
Yeah, John. How you will assure that they have a proper review for invoices if you didn't do any interview to some of that employees?
Well, we do interviews. We do conduct interviews with employees. Also, when we perform our walkthroughs, even though we don't call it internal control testing, but we do look at a sample of invoices and documents.
But my question is, did you make interviews to some of that employees from the city of Sunset Valley?
Specific to authorization?
Yeah, first, if they made the purchase and check the dates and who made the purchase and who authorized the purchase.
Yes, I believe that's a standard procedure. We look at all that when we perform our walkthrough procedures.
Okay. My recommendation, perhaps,
You might be able
you
to
have,
add some perspective to that, but that's something we always look.
hello?
Alfonso, breaking up.
Okay. My other is, perhaps, he referred to recommendations and deficiencies. So if we are looking one report, if I am the owner of some business, I would like to know what is his recommendations and what are my deficiencies. But he needs to write that. So in that way, in the foot of the page, I will find comments, recommendations, and deficiencies. In that way, will be clear for us to understand. He has a company, he has a lot of experience, but when we are watching these budgets, we need to have a better opinion and a better understanding of the budget. So my suggestion is he needs to put in the foot of the page that kind of comments. Recommendations, they are. Deficiencies, these are. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfonso. Any other discussion? Was there any other questions, Rudy? We got you covered. Was there somebody else, Wanda?
Yes, I have one question, page 47, on the pension plan. And so that the liability was calculated using the discount rate of 6.75. My question is, how is that rate determined?
That is a good question. They have actuaries that they.
I think you passed.
There we are. Do I have it? 6.75. Is that the one you're talking about?
Right, exactly. That's it.
How do they determine that? That is something that they determine. How they figure that, I'm not sure. It probably has something to do with uh, some multiple involving bill rates and rates and that kind of stuff. So I don't even know if the information that we get from them even explains how they develop that rate. That's a question.
So do y'all ever see, I think that's been kind of consistent, the rate we've used. Have you seen any changes over the years to different discount rates?
I haven't, but who knows, given the latest volatility, that we're experiencing, it could change.
Mhm.
Um, and again, these are all actuarial assumptions that are determined by minds greater than mine. So I'm not sure how they come up with those specific to this plan, but yeah, that it could very well change.
Yeah, I mean, just a point different makes a significant change. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Wanda. Anyone else?
Regine has her hand raised. Regine, you're unmuted.
Okay. So on those TMRS reports, Wanda, we can go on the website and they have reports that have hundreds of pages of how they come up with those numbers. So I'll help you go through that, and then if I'm sure they have a recap summary. So, but we can look at that together at a later date of how they find all that stuff. I mean, it's a lot.
Okay, summary's good for me.
Okay.
Cliff notes.
I'll get that for you. Right. It's exactly right. Okay, I'm out.
To you, John. All right, so I think how's the agenda item worded, Sylvia? Is it, we're just doing a cursory review and handing this off to council. Council will ultimately approve the review, or do we do that at this level? I couldn't remember from last year.
There's an agenda item right behind this. Let me take control back from John.
Thank you, John.
Thank you all.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Hi, John, you need to give me control back.
Did I not give you control? Let me see how I do that.
Give me control.
Chat, let's see. Where do I do that on here? I thought I gave control back, but I guess I didn't, huh?
Nope.
Because I can see your agenda, but maybe, let's see. Is there an icon or where would I do that? Is it under attendees? No.
Can I jump in, Michael? You asked how this is presented as far as the audit. It says review, discuss, and possibly make a recommendation to City Council to accept annual audit.
Okay, good. I couldn't remember the exact wording in the budget. I mean, in the agenda. Thank you, Rudy.
Okay.
I got it.
Did you get it?
I got it. There you go.
So then the motion would be something like, we're going to recommend approval to council with the noted changes discussed, and then Regine has those down.
Correct. The verbiage is review, discuss, and make recommendation to the City Council to accept the 2018-2019 annual audit with recommended changes.
Do I have a motion from someone?
You have that motion from John.
Thank you, John Blanca. Any discussion, or is there a second to the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Charles Young. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye, or raise your little hand.
Michael, if I could call a quick roll, that would make it a lot easier for everybody.
Okay, you guys are going to have to either raise your hand or unmute yourself.
Yep. John made the motion. Dr. Browning isn't here. Mark Bruner.
Aye.
Alfonso Carmona.
Aye.
Michael Francis.
Yeah,
Yes.
Aye. Okay. Mr. Goyette.
Aye.
Mr. Young seconded the motion, and Mr. Cowan is an alternate. Okay, motion passes.
Excellent. Thanks again, John, and thanks, staff.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. I think we discussed prior to starting that, we'll go back and move to agenda item 3, which was Wanda's liaison report. Wanda?
Okay, so if I turn off my webcam, it's because my dogs are going in and out of my office here, and so they're a little bit annoying, and I don't want to be distracting. So I'll make this very brief because I know we have so much to do tonight. One thing I want to note is that we do have a new city attorney. Her name is Roxana Stevens. So once we get back to normal, we will be a person and stuff, and so that'll be nice. A couple of things that in the city council we've done. One thing is that the programs that we originally labeled as canceled, we have changed that status to updated to suspended. So it's suspended until further review. So they're not totally canceled, so they don't totally go away, but they are just suspended at this point. Another point of interest that the budget committee might be interested in is on Tuesday's meeting, we had an action item on a mitigation fee for Brodie Homestead. And and the reason I'm bringing it up to the budget committee is that this is a fee that was incurred in 2008 that we collected, and it was to be used for some mitigation that never occurred. So we did vote to return the fee, but it doesn't really, this was kind of a surprise to me that I didn't know about it. I don't know where it shows up in our budget. I know it's separated out into it's not necessarily in our budget, I guess, but it's
Right.
separated out. I know Regine puts it in a committed fund, but it's not real visible. And I think we might want to look at ways, how do we make that visible, particularly if it's project related. And this was an infrastructure, or could have been an infrastructure project, so that could have showed up, maybe perhaps should have showed up on our schedule. So that way it wouldn't get lost or whatever. So just a thought there. Other aspects, marketing RFD is in process. We've got, that will be coming to council. We've had a number of applicants for that. And we've had some presentations on the utility fund as well as on the water fund. So those are all available online that people can view. So I think that is the majority of the items that would affect this committee. So thank you. Any questions for me?
Hey, Regine, isn't that a balance sheet item?
I'm sorry, say again?
Isn't that fund a balance sheet item?
Yeah, it should be.
It shows up in the general fund as restricted fund on the trial balance and in the audit.
Okay.
But I guess the issue is, if it's project oriented, should it show up on one of our project sheets?
It could have. That was a public works project, I guess, for lack of a better word, and I'd remind them about it, and it just nothing ever got done with it. So it's a good point. We probably should have a list or something. I don't know how to do it in the new budget. We could definitely look at that and see. But there aren't very many. That was the biggest one, and there's about $19,000 stuff that goes all the way back to 2009. But it's like there's like one for $2,500, one for $1,500 for very specific things, and we're going to debate whether we just need to put those in as a revenue and get rid of those, or actually do something with the money. And then there are no other mitigation fee money.
Yeah, that seemed like that was the only real project-oriented one. So, but that's just something to think about in the future, so we don't lose sight of that. So,
right.
And maybe, and Suzanne, this is and for you, Regine, when we had talked about going back to review that CIP projects and all those other things, capital improvements and all that gets integrated into that thought process, right? Juan and you and I talked about that on an annual basis. We not only look at that, but those other projects that might be inside of a number somewhere, then we're not thinking that pulling that number apart and seeing what's in there, but that if they're project related, that there should be a project board, and everything that's project related ought to be on that. So.
Yeah, it also shows up in the when I do a fund balance report, where we talk about what the fund balance is. That's that comes out of the balance in the account, and then you subtract all that stuff, and that's always in there too. So, but we can definitely show it better. I think that would be especially with the new, how we're doing the new stuff. There's got to be a way we can show that somehow.
Terry had a question, but you're muted.
Who's
Thank you, Michael. I want to thank Wanda for bringing that up, and I think it's real important that when we have impact fees or collect fees for mitigation, that and usually it's in exchange for something. And often it's in exchange for us weakening some part of our code or providing additional impervious cover, something like that. So the city stands to lose from it if they don't mitigate or if they don't deal with whatever the impact is. There's a mention of $19,000 still outstanding, but there's no list that can be used to manage this with. And so I would really encourage the staff to do that ASAP so that we can, hopefully we can take care of whatever the intention was that those fees were collected. They shouldn't be collected if we're not going to do anything with them. On the one hand, on the other hand, we give up something when in exchange for those fees.
Right.
So yeah, so I think it's important. My concern was that it could call into question a lot of mitigation dollars, and that the city could acquire a huge potential liability by returning the mitigation fee, which I consulted with an attorney I have, and it is an impact fee, and it doesn't impact the other. The city has a habit of collecting taxes and then putting it in a reserve status and not spending it, and we shouldn't do that going forward. So when we collect something, we need to do something with it. So thank you, Wanda.
Okay.
Thank you, Terry.
So I just wanted to let folks know in the OpenGov in the budget module we're going to be reviewing. There is a capital improvement budget, so it will have the ability to track. But some of those older projects, Terry's right. I've got to figure out what they were, and I've seen email after email from Regine kind of begging, like, please tell me what this was and how do we get rid of it. And it is only about $19,000, but it's still $19,000 that somebody paid or was owed or is left over from something that we really should take care of. But in terms of capital budgets, we do have a process forward.
Well, just briefly again, as we've talked about, and Sylvia, you and I have talked about, that things get onto those capital project lists or whatever, and they just kind of live there, and sometimes they don't get done, i.e. the lift station.
Yep.
Should have been done, but we get tunnel vision, as the committee, because there's so much in front of us and we just don't think about that. So that process, and I think this has helped us get better. So I think your point's well taken, Terry. We're getting better and we're trying to be more accountable. So. Before we to anybody else? Alfonso?
Yeah. Michael, I think that last night they discussed about the $61,000 and for Homestead and that money that they had for impact fees. When I was checking some of the information, I remember that in 2007 they made the master drainage plan, and with that master drainage plan, they were talking impervious cover, and they were talking mainly some area behind Homestead and the Madeleine. And in 2008, they made in 2010, they made another study that was drainage utility assessment in July 28, 2010. And they put a lot of concern about the impervious cover. So I don't know if at this moment with the new attorney, Suzanne, in reality, they need to explain, they need to look into the records, and maybe some people that was at that time working with that. I am talking 2008 and 2010, because last night when they gave it to Mr. I don't remember the name of that person, then he needs that if in reality is not using, but I think was a purpose, and the purpose was, it was the design of the water quality equipment, water quality installations that they had. If they oversized that, and in that way, now they gave it to him some credit for the impervious cover that he was using. above the design of Homestead. So in my opinion, they need to clear that, because if they are looking more and more that papers, when I was looking that, they show me something different. So it was some criteria to came to that number, $61,000. And I don't remember if that was what he was using, 18,000 square foot extra of impervious cover. Without too much details and going with our meeting, I suggest that the attorney, they need to check that, because it's not only for the new $19,000 and for the budget, etc. Previously, it was very unclear, the budget. And if at this moment we start in a new way, they need to check that. It's not only, this was bad, erase that. You have to be very, very sure if you erase that, is my suggestion.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to 7 and 8. Before we start 7 and 8, your chair wants to back up to our last meeting when we got together, and apologize for your chair becoming a little unhinged. That's not my normal process, and I want to apologize publicly to leaning pretty hard on Sylvia. She and I've had a couple of good conversations since then, and we'll kind of move ahead, and I'll be a little bit more together. It happens to everyone. That's not my normal process of running things. So anyway, but we've had a couple of great conversations about moving to where we are today, in terms of what things might look like. And I'm excited about what I've seen in the material. And I'm excited about what we've been talking about and trying to formulate a process to try and move ahead. If you think as a committee with limited funds and expenses, how we make that go together, right? In the past, it's always been, we know the income is going to be around a certain amount and it's easy just to keep moving ahead. Well, that is not the case this year, right? We've got some unknown variables that are really going to affect things. And since we don't have a lot of clarity, I mean, and council's the same way. So nothing's really come down to say, hey, this is how we want you to approach that. It kind of puts the onus on us to determine some parameters on how we're going to move ahead. Think about some basic things are core expenses, right? Water, police, those are core things that we, okay, well, what's the fund for that? Then we start to move up that hierarchy of how we need things based on whatever the funds might look like that we're going to have to work with, which we won't know here too soon, but fairly not too far out. And Sylvia's going to go into that. So be thinking about that as we go through this process. And towards the end of this, we'll have that conversation again about how we might formulate. Otherwise, we're going to wind up talking about every single item in the budget. And that would be, and debating them. And it would be difficult for us in the time that we have left to try and formulate a real process for doing that and in that kind of level. So we can give some thought to that as we move ahead, and share some ideas that Sylvia's come up with, and Wanda and I have been talking, and some others about how we move ahead, and then hand that off to the council and say, okay, guys, here's what we've done. Here's the parameters that we set up to help us make those decisions, because we needed to have some sort of template, right, to formulate what goes in and what comes out, and then let them finish up with that. We'll be further down the road and it'll be easier. So this year's going to be a real different, almost a paradigm shift on how we've always done it, right? That how we've always done it process, and then moving into a new thought process is going to really stretch us, I think. But I'm excited about moving ahead. I know that we've got a great committee. We may have to work in a few more meetings just to kind of keep moving ahead, and I think that everybody's probably amenable to that, because the goal of, we've got a deadline, right, and that's marching toward us every day. But I'm still pretty confident we can get there. Well, having said that, let me let Sylvia take you through the things that we've been talking about, and I think you're going to be excited, as I am, about where we are and how we move ahead. Sylvia?
Thank you, Michael. And I too want to apologize. As a new administrator, I sort of take for granted all of the historical that's gone in to build everything that you work here. And I feel like we had an atom bomb hit, not just with COVID, but all of the changes recently. And I realize the change isn't hard, and I think it's been compounded even more. So my apologies to the committee for if anybody felt like I was trying to ramrod anything through. I think we're on a good path. Michael's right. We've had a lot of very good conversations as to where we're all heading, and I think we all want the same thing, and that's a stronger, leaner, better, more resilient Sunset Valley. So Rudy has her hand up. I don't know if you want to.
Rudy?
You haven't done the minutes yet?
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah. Oops. Senility on the rampage. All right, Rudy. We'll move back to item 4 then. Is there a discussion on the minutes?
Move that we approve.
Motion
John.
by Mr. Plaka. Is there a second?
Second.
Alfonso,
Second.
thank you. Thank you for that. Discussion. Hearing no discussion, all in favor say aye, or I guess, are we going to roll call this too?
Rudy has her hand up.
Ah, Rudy.
Can the motion maker say with corrections?
Accepted.
Corrections have been sent to Regine.
Thank you, Rudy. I'm sure they're clerical and just anything of substance there that we need to discuss.
No, sir. Just
Regine,
words.
you're good?
Typos, just typos.
Typos, okay. Seconder's okay with that? Alfonso, okay. Any other
It's
discussion?
okay. Nope.
You want to roll call that, Sylvia?
Yes. Okay. Mark Bruner,
Aye.
Michael Francis,
Yes.
Charles Goyette,
Yes.
Charles Young,
Yes.
Terry Cowan.
He's our alternate.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Motion passes. All right. Thank you for catching me on that, Councilmember Rosengarten.
So I'm going to now, let's see. This is the presentation that was included in your budget packet. If you go into your materials section and go to training, I've added a couple more materials that I'm going to cover tonight, and so everybody has access to them. You know, again, this is consistently a work in progress. And I want to start with the budget calendar. This financial calendar is dated 2/27. I believe there's one on the internet dated 3/26. And it basically has what should have already happened through May 31st. And of serious concern to folks is, hey, where are the committees in this process? We should have already by May 28th done certain things. The audit scheduled for April just got delivered in June. Budget binders, where are they? That should have been May 15th. And then the hot fund request, that's also a very important conversation that needs to be had. The committee meetings and work we had starting June 18th, and then weekly meetings throughout. So I believe what has happened now is today is June the 4th. We're going to meet June the 11th. And so I have a proposed calendar that's here that is shared on the screen, and it's also in your materials here because I've got some questions that we'll need to figure out our way through them. So in my mind, I've got work with the committees to do June the 8th through June the 18th, and that's going to mesh with the work that this committee is doing beginning tonight through June the 18th. We've had to work backwards through some, not just the COVID, but also the council's prioritization of essential services, and then also the committees also ranked what they wanted to see come back. And so rather than just give sort of a, I don't want to say a willy-nilly of we'd like to see these 4 services back or these 4 programs come back, The staff and I worked on a cost of service sheet, and we continue to work through that. Planning and Environmental sees theirs on Monday. And it's basically the cost of a particular program or service. And it says if mulch delivery, for example, how many employees, how much material, how much, et cetera, and we come up with a number, because I want to be able to defend whatever it is they're requesting. So that's my work with the committees and the staff as we move forward. The audit presentation just did get bumped to June the 4th. And then tonight, we're going to talk about the budget binders in electronic version and the worksheets that we've come up with as part of my hearing what you guys said at the last committee meeting, that, hey, we're looking at a new process and things look different. And you haven't really explained that to me. So I'm trying to bring it back to what is, quote unquote, the normal view, or as close to the normal view, and show what that electronic process looks like, so that, one, the comfort level is there and we're baby stepping our way into the giant budget binder. But we will be prepared to deliver those as soon as you guys give the go ahead on the format. But again, there'll be an electronic version. The hot funds also remains that question. I've got committees who are impacted by hot funds, and we had initially set a hot fund application date on the website. Those were due May 15th. I'm sorry, May 31st. And we know that our hotelier didn't submit first quarter. We know he's not going to submit second quarter. We know very likely he won't submit third quarter based on conversations with us. So we need to really make a determination as a committee what that revenue projection is going to be for the hot fund. Yeah. Also understanding that the hot fund was already going to draw down some fund balance because it was trying to pay for the marketing RFP that the council continues to march toward. There will be a special meeting for that RFP on the 10th to listen to CED and move forward the top 3 rankings. And then it's expected to be awarded at council on June the 16th. So that's a conversation that's probably going to have to be very hot and heavy with both this committee and the council as to the funding. So revenue projections are expected to be delivered June the 18th. We're on track for everything else. Everything else I don't see any issue with. I do see our revenue projection on the calendar, on the original posted calendar. We had revenue projections again later on. Revised revenue projections should be provided by June the 23rd. I have a feeling this committee is going to have revenue projections every single month because things are changing very quickly. As you know, the governor issued new opening orders beginning today and tomorrow. So hopefully things start getting back on track. And this particular month will be our first real look as to how much was actually lost. And I know there's been criticism about, well, you guys were too austere in the cuts. I'm hoping that I was too austere. I'm hoping that we're able to begin to build back, because as you know, it's always easier to put back than take away. Take away is very hard, as we have all felt in the last couple of weeks. Yeah. So going back to the presentation, the top quadrant, and I welcome any committee comments. Michael, I don't know if you want to, if we want to comment as we go through, or you'd like to wait to the end. I'll leave that up to you too.
If it's the pleasure of the committee, maybe we could just jot our thoughts down and proceed through this so that you're contiguous and can present your material, and then maybe hit those at the end.
Okay.
Before we do that, if we're going to adopt the calendar, you said you had, was this the one we were just looking at?
This is the one that you're, this is the one that you're looking at. The one that's included in your presentation is exactly the calendar as it was adopted back in March, I believe it's March 26th, which is, you guys spoke about it in the March meeting, which was really really right at the start of COVID. So we really weren't thinking that we were going to be in the position that we are today when the calendar was initially adopted.
Yeah. Well, Sylvia, would help if we nail down the calendar and get that out of the way and then move through the rest of this. Because what I'd like to see us, my thought is that we adopt a revised date. So we get rid of that 3/26. We have a new calendar and then we can post that on the website.
Mm-hmm.
Does that work,
Michael?
Regine? Yes.
So I think we should have, nothing has changed on the calendar except the top portion above the first yellow line.
Right.
I think if we do a get rid of all that, because that didn't happen the way it was ever marked out, and
Okay.
and approve the calendar the way it is. We're still on track to do all that stuff,
Okay.
and then repost that on the website as the approved calendar.
Do we want to put in one or two just temporary dates as a potential extra meetings, just so we can throw those on our calendar? We can always, like you said, we can take them away later, but it might be easier to put them on now if there's some dates that you guys have that work with your schedule and council and all the other committees. Can you maybe look at that?
So we have June the 11th on your calendar already, on our calendars, which is next Thursday, planning to meet with this committee. So we've already sort of added an extra date, and I've added it, but I was working on the assumption that we were going to work through tonight, and then you guys were going to ask us to bring something back.
Okay, that works.
I don't think we're gonna have anything for the June 11th meeting though, Sylvia, because I think we talked about we were gonna be able to do all that so that we could send that to them on June 12th for the June 18th meeting. I think the additional meetings should be like in July. Like I know. Hang on, I'm trying to look at the calendar.
You have a calendar.
So like July 2nd, we don't have a meeting for that. That's July 4th weekend. But if nobody's doing anything, we could meet then. And then because then we'll have stuff. We'll have the information to look at, and we can actually do something. And then July.
My calendar's wide open. I'm sure a lot of us are in that position. So some of it's going to be, I think, again, from staffing perspective, what do you guys have going on? Council prep time, taking that into consideration.
So I left June 11th as an extra because when I go through the OpenGov, it may not be material present, but you guys might want to do a training or a driving session with OpenGov. But I'll leave that up to you guys. And I did just type in July 2nd as an extra meeting.
Okay, yeah, yeah, that driving session that you discussed, I think desperately it would be good for us to do that.
No. I think.
No.
Well, never mind. I just don't think that. Well, I think we should wait and let's look at what we've got to look at tonight to see what y'all are going to be getting, and then let's make the decision of when we should meet again. How about that?
That's the same thing we just said.
Yeah. Oh, did we? Okay. Well, I just don't think that. I think the June 11th meeting is a little premature.
Okay. Well, we can.
That's me.
We can keep it open in case we need it. Yeah. All right. All right. So, but I like your idea. So, Regine, let's take off the stuff that's passed, so it's just a little cleaner, and then repost that. Is there any objection by the committee to just, or do we need a formal adoption? I don't think it's on the agenda as a formal adoption. But I think if we have consensus, we're probably okay.
It is as a formal item, but it's on item number 8. So if you'd like, we can go through the process.
Well, all I'd say is review, discuss, and revise. So we're just to revise the 3/26 calendar with an update and just change the other dates on there?
Yes.
Okay, good. Any objection from committee members?
No.
Thank you. Okay. knocked one out. Take her away.
Okay, so back to the presentation.
Thank
So
you.
this is the existing budget format. These are how you see the revenues, which is one of the first things we'll touch, right? Our revenue projections. In again, in the material section tonight, what I'm going to bring up is this is the budget worksheet example that let me share my screen. Hang on just a minute. Okay, so let me zoom out of this a little bit. So in your current format, this is what it looks like. You see general fund revenue, and you have your accounting, and you have your actuals per year. You have your percentage decrease, the rate of growth or rate of decrease, and then proposed budget and your percentage increases. The worksheet that we're proposing, which is a spill out from OpenGov, is very similar. The difference is it's aggregated in one entire workbook. So all I'm showing you right now is the administrator. Let me try to zoom in. I'm sorry. I'm realizing that you guys are seeing it very microscopically. So we see some changes, and that's really by the departments. You guys don't normally see Department 1. This committee may, but the outside world doesn't normally see that it's called Department 1. You guys are accustomed to seeing the GL code, you're accustomed to seeing the account, and you're accustomed to seeing all of the years, and then you're accustomed to seeing the description of what that actually is. And so this is, again, by department. And then at the bottom part of the spreadsheet, so we have an aggregate of revenues here on line 12. And then at the bottom part of the spreadsheet, we start with the expenses within that department. And again, we have the same year-to-year view with the descriptor. And then at the very bottom, you'll still have your percentage over and your rate of growth. Only difference is it is specifically by department. And so when we talk about preparing a budget book, the electronic budget book looks a little bit different. It's gonna be aggregated by fund, which you see right now in your budget tabs. And then the worksheets, again, very, very similar. And then the tabs would be listed down at the bottom. So it'd be Fund 1, Fund 2, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what an electronic version of what you're normally used to seeing looks like. In OpenGov, as you learn to drive OpenGov, let's see. As you learn to drive OpenGov, here's the electronic version of it. It is fund. And just if you were to imagine your budget book, once you open the fund, you'll see a cover sheet that has an explanation. You'll see the expenses within every department within that fund. And then as you click on in the fund, you're again able to see year over year. In OpenGov, you don't see the percentage change. We're able to make adjustments here. Regine's gone in and made adjustments and comments. And then as the committee talks, as you're going through your worksheets, right, it's sort of a dual process. As you're going through your worksheets and you want us to make any adjustments, we will make these adjustments here. And so that was my comment about I may not need 15 driver's licenses. I may only need a few driver's licenses, but I want everybody to be along for the ride and the show to see what happens when we make the adjustments as this committee is having discussion. The slider over to the left is in today's world, if we had base revenues of 5.3 and we had, we started with base revenues of 5.3, we made an adjustment of 1.3 to have revenues of a little over 4 million. We have expenses now of 3.8 million, and we would end up having a surplus of $205,000. So as we're having the discussion, I would have OpenGov up. The committees have their worksheets like you had before in electronic version. As we're having the discussion, staff's able to make any adjustments immediately, and you can see the impact that it would have. So I'm gonna go to the back to the. I'm sorry, Regine's yelling something at me right now. I don't know if she's muted.
Are you there?
Yes.
Yes.
Go back to that other page and go down where it shows the operating expenses and stuff like that, because the salaries, we don't really pay that. We pay attention, but not right now.
Gotcha.
So if you go to like the engineering fees, it'll show what I've already done, I think.
Yep. There you go. So you can see, for example,
I've gone in. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So I've gone in. I'm not sure if this is the final one because I've done a couple of versions, but I've gone in and decreased some things, and so you see the new budget over on the right hand side. But so this is the sheet that I'm doing, that Susanna's taking and creating the other sheets that y'all will actually be using to review and stuff, and then we'll go in and do those. So I just come to point that out.
Do the headers follow down, Sylvia? I noticed when we scroll down, we kind of lose the header there.
Yes, the headers scroll down, but it's also available in table format later on. I'll show you. I'll show you what that looks like.
Okay, that's fine.
So I'm going to go back to the presentation, and I want to stop here in case anybody has any questions, because basically you had a sheet here that had budget format with revenues, and then you had a detail sheet that showed you its purpose and description. Yeah. So when I go into OpenGov, it's all in one place. There's the purpose and description and the line item itself. And I am in expenses. We did the same thing for revenues. So again, by department. And so if I click on administration, very similar, able to tell you what the revenues are, what the descriptor is, and adjustments that have been made. So we've already gone in and made some revenue assumptions that we're going to visit with the committee on, and we started with a 25% reduction. Obviously, as I told everybody, as we receive more sales tax reports, we may be adjusting it either up or down. But the beauty about the system is, again, as we make adjustments in the line items, I can immediately to the left see what impact that has.
Okay.
So I'll go back to, so we've combined two sheets into one essentially.
Right.
So if I were to dump it out raw, this is kind of what it looks like. And so we've organized it enough so that it's a little easier on the eyes, and you know what you're looking at. Yeah. And again, this is the format. It is in your go-to meeting. There's a materials link that you can see the two documents I just shared. Again, here's the internal view of OpenGov. And then the new piece, and I don't want to say new piece because we just finished building this, is the workforce planning. And so what I heard in the beginning was, I don't know who's here. We need to know exactly what's charged to, how much is each particular employee, how much do they cost total. And so in the back, and this is the back part, you guys won't be messing with this, but we had to build a workforce plan. And so this essentially is every single person that works for the city of Sunset Valley and how much they cost. So this is an upgrade that's going to happen. So you see Tanya in 4 different places, and that's because Tanya's coded to 4 different codes. So we came in and we did a, it's a report, correct, Susanna?
Yeah, it's a report.
Yes, we came in and did a, we did a report, and so you'll be able now to do a comparative analysis of salaries and benefits starting from 14-15 through what is 2021, and you'll be able to drill down pretty detailed and see all of the staff and who's earning what. And as you highlight, right, we go through those. Now the workforce, when it gets updated, you'll only see Tanya in one place, and you'll see Tanya sort of as a pie chart so that you can see all 4 pieces. Right now it's a little bit clunky, but they're working on that. The changes was, again, minor changes to the calendar. We've taken that out. Staff is the data entry point to model information. The committee should have received several emails today to join. And so when we build the budget, we're building what are called proposals. Where am I? We're building what are called proposals, because that's essentially what you're viewing. You're viewing what the administration department, what the public works department is proposing as their budget. So they're called proposals. So you would have received an invitation to view a particular proposal or to view a particular budget. In this case, I believe you received the proposal to view the budget in its entirety as we built it. And my only caveat to that is we still have to go through, for example, I think we still have the utility fund to go through, and we still have some of the funds that we're adding some final tweaks to. We're trying really hard to follow the calendar, and I know that you have administration and court and police and crime control due first, so we're giving those priority and so on and so forth. Has anybody received their invitation, and have they logged in?
I may have it. I've not logged in or checked my home email yet, so.
Yeah, it was several. You would have received several, because every proposal is a different item.
I think Charles said he saw his.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I saw mine too.
Good.
John.
Yeah, Sylvia,
Yes.
how do you show like our infrastructure funds where we go out 30, 40 years?
That's going to be the capital improvement budget. We haven't built that yet. We're in the process of building that. It has several periods and several discussion. And I think what's critical in that capital improvement piece is it has carryover. I mean, it has the ability that the committee can at any point go in and see, hey, this amount hasn't been drawn down, and can make notes and those kinds of things, as you talked about earlier about, hey, what happens to things when they don't get done?
Yeah, good.
Oh, that's good. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I'll focus back on administration, and then I wanted to share with the committee a city that I'm gonna halt sharing my screen right quick, because I think I closed out that tab, I believe. Oh no, here it is. So this is the city of, I can't pronounce, California. So when we talk about a digital budget book and we talk about what that ends up looking like for the residents, this is a very good example. So it talks about the document, and the table of contents, I think, is what I fell in love with the most, because if you want to see the general fund, if you want to see special revenue funds, or if you want to see specific departments, and I'm going to click on the city manager's department. And so here's basically their cover sheet that says, this is who we are, this is how many people we employ, this is how many people are in the department, and here's what our budget looks like. And then the budget is dynamic. They can drill down into, okay, what makes up 719,000? What makes up an internal service use, and what makes up overhead? There's an ability to put in anything that we want. And I would like us to start with not just accomplishments, but I would also like us to see what our future objectives are, what we would like our performance to look like, how we're going to measure our success. And the other very neat thing about this is we have the ability now to say, okay, the city manager's office, for example, went from this amount in 16 all the way to this amount in 21, 22. And so it gives us an ability to say, hey, we maybe need to check expenses in that particular category, or maybe that's a category we really want to pay attention to. And then it's also available to show in a spreadsheet. So every single department and every single fund has a quote unquote page that looks like this. So I am open, ready, and willing to take any questions, comments, concerns, or anything else.
So I'll jump in there first. Some of this is a leap of faith for us guys, and right, we're moving ahead, and this is the platform, and so I think we're going to be finding things as we move through this. We like this. What about that? And I think it's got the bones of what we've put into place over the years. I think it's just going to be a learning experience for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Terry?
Yeah, well, I may have found the answer to my question. It could be in that example spreadsheet, but I did sign in and look at some of the modules that were being worked on. And one, I didn't do anything in them because I didn't want to mess anything up. I didn't know what permissions were on and what permissions were off. It was incremental. It's a piece at a time. And that may be the way we really need to look at it. So my comment was going to be somewhere to see it overall too. Because when we're working on it, we're going to have to work one module at a time, I think. Unless, I know with my computer, I can split it into 2 screens, but that's it. So that's as much as I can see at any time. And this is kind of a side thing for Sylvia's. I have trouble finding the links that you referred to back to the presentation that you're giving. If you could tell me where that is on GoToMeeting.
This one, the presentation?
Yeah.
It's in the city website and also in Open Town Hall. If you go here to the Open Town Hall, it's in item number 7. The link is a hot link here.
Okay.
But in GoToMeeting, what I included was the calendar and what I think the worksheet would look like here. If the committee's amenable to the digital worksheets looking like this, then that gives staff the go ahead to begin to put the rest of those together and get you guys the sections that put together the budget book that you guys are ready and anxious to see.
Yes.
So
very much so.
Ask a follow-up. So the samples that were sent out that for us to look at, do you wanted feedback on them?
So you guys are going to do that as a committee. So basically what you see is exactly what I'm seeing today. You're seeing what's been inputted into the system from an expense, a projected expense, and you're seeing what has been inputted into the system from a projected revenue standpoint. And so Those are the same as the written worksheets for you guys to analyze, have some discussion on, and bring back to committee and staff. I'm happy to take the questions whenever, but I think if you have a question, maybe another committee member has the same question. So I'll leave that up to Michael on how he wants to aggregate those, how we're going to take questions along the way.
Let's just
Thank
jump
you,
in.
Sylvia.
There's questions. Really? Nobody? That's a first.
I got a question.
Charles
Charles?
does.
Charles, go ahead. Okay, so I'm the newbie here, so I don't have any real base of reference. I mean, we talked about this budget book, and I've seen them, but I've never looked inside one. And considering we have all this change that we have to accommodate, speaking for the experienced people on this committee, I'm just wondering if by virtue of going to a digital budget book, if that just adds a little bit more stress and strain to this process of transition. I don't know about you. I'm pretty old fashioned when it comes to looking, like I like to read books that are in paper. I mean, this budget book, the fact that it's tangible, it's paper, it's fold outs, it's color, it's a lot of cool stuff I can relate to, I can touch. Yeah, I don't know how other people feel, and I don't know, I'd like people to weigh in on the fact that if they're dealing with a digital budget book, if that's going to just add a little bit more, stress to this transition process. That's all.
And we're prepared either way, Charles. I mean, our preference would be digital, but we are prepared to, the worksheet that I showed, we are prepared to print those if that's the wish of the committee. The only reason that it would be in this format as opposed to the last year's format is because this follows exactly what this digital layout looks like. So as the committee's talking, it's easier for staff to keep up and do the data entry.
Yeah, okay, all right. I guess maybe where I was coming from, and I twisted myself up, I think, in the process of asking the question, because I'm thinking back again to the to the traditional budget book, which is really not going to be the case, right? I mean, when we talk budget book, we're talking about from the perspective of a open gov collated set of information, correct? Okay. But again, and this is where I'd like, other members of the committee to just jump in. The fact that when you're dealing with a bounded set of information, physical paper type information, I don't know about anyone else, but I get a greater sense of organization from that in terms of how to navigate that set of information. If it's bounded, if it's in paper, I know where to go back to. I can get a sense for the overall product. Easier, dealing with the physical material than dealing with bits of information. So, I mean, just trying to anticipate how I can get how I can be productive in this situation, especially considering the fact that, I mean, a lot of the, I'm familiar with basic accounting terminology, but how this applies to a city budget and what we've done in the past, of course, I don't have any basis of reference. So I'm a little bit tentative in terms of how effective I'm going to be in this whole process. So anyway, thanks.
Thank you, Charles. Others?
Oh, Regine's got her hand raised. I'm sorry. Regine?
So, yep. So I'm gonna just, I don't really have too much. Okay, so I've been doing the budget for 20 something years, and this is a total new ball game, and it's taken me a little while to get on board. But I'm old school. I'm kind of like Charles. I like things, but once you get into it and you start working with it, you'll see how good it is. I want to say, and I would hope that everyone would give it the chance to to at least work. When we get to other sheets, not the OpenGov sheets, but the sheets that have the colored columns, those are the ones that we'll still be working from. Those are the ones that will have what we review from, what we look at the expenses, what we're cutting. And then in the meeting, when we're sitting there talking and we're like, okay, well, engineering costs, right now the proposed budget is $12,000. The committee's like, well, I think we need to cut that more. Sylvia is able to go to the OpenGov and cut that right then and there to show what the new number is. And the fact that this is all digital is new to me also. But I think once we really get into it and we start working, we start discussing and see how it's actually going to flow, it will end up being a good thing. And it's really not that different from what we were doing. It's just not going to be on paper. And so I think, I'm excited about it. I think Susanna's done a lot of work on it, and Sylvia, and I think it's okay. Carolyn's been involved in it, getting it done. So I hope that we all give it a chance, and it'll be a good thing. Over. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, I think where I'm having trouble seeing is, I've got a nice big screen here. I can look at a big color, but there's something about, and I have to agree with Charles to some degree. If as we as a committee and you guys are staff, because we're having to Zoom this, right? If we were in the room together, it'd be so much easier. But thinking about this separation of space, that we have a document in front of us and we're looking at that at the same time that and we're following the same pattern, right? We're going from A to Z. We're following those sheets down. We're seeing what the numbers are. If you can pull that in that format. And I'm just thinking out loud with you, we then can make our notes and we can refer back to that. Again, maybe just helping us transition for a very paper intense environment to maybe not quite so much paper. Because like you said,
right.
Giving up paper, I'm really having a lot of anxiety about that. But there's something in the middle where we're still saying, okay, here's PD, here's Public Works, here's general, here's court. Not in the same amount of paper, Regine, but just that there's something that we're all being able to follow together and making it easy for all the committee members, because some of them may be working off an iPad or, and trying to see that long spread out sheet might be difficult.
That's a true statement.
and so sorry.
Go ahead.
Michael, I had something I wanted to add here.
Okay. Charles.
Go ahead, Regine.
No, I was just going to say that's something that I think after after our first meeting and we should try it digital and not, just and see how it goes. And if it doesn't work, then, but the whole getting on board with digital, it's hard. It is really hard for me, but I think it's something we should try and just see how it works. And then if it doesn't work, we can definitely, or you can print them. There's no reason. I think you can print from that screen if you wanted a printout version. And then also, Michael, we're going to start meeting, I think, in July is when we start meeting again, not virtually, but in the actual council chambers.
Oh, good. That was one of my questions. I'm ready. I think we can sit far apart and mask up and let's do it. I mean.
Yep. So, Michael,
like
I said, as a staff, I know Regine has a position, but I truly, we're prepared either way. And, to some extent, I can recognize that I'm visually impaired, so I can recognize that it is hard sometimes on a screen. I've had 11 eye surgeries over the last 2 years, so trust me, I get it. And the meat in the middle, as we put it in the format that would be easy for staff, that as we're discussing, we're just able to do the simple data entry. Maybe not all of the committee wants a printed worksheet, but definitely this Excel worksheet format, maybe as we transition, maybe this is what we release in June to you guys. And when we get together, if you guys feel it's okay to wean off of these, we're okay to wean off of them either. I want to be as flexible as I can to the committee, recognizing we're all under different pressure points and everybody has a different need. For example, an iPad versus a PC.
Thank you. Charles?
I wanted to echo some of the things that Charles Goyette said. Although I certainly appreciate what Regine said, and I agree with it. I logged into this and I looked at it, and for me, it's really familiar because I design and build stuff like this. I don't think that's going to be true for everyone. My experience in the past with taking people from paper to digital systems or from older digital systems to new one is that they can be quite confusing for people at first. So I wanted to tell the other committee members, if something is confusing to you, it's because it's confusing. And you need to ask about it and get into it. And, because I've noticed before that people are afraid to say anything because they're afraid of looking dumb. And that's not the case. When you know all the conventions, you know how this stuff is built, it seems very easy to use, but it takes you a while to get there.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to say, I don't understand this, I don't know how to use this, or I don't get this. Because that's typical when you first encounter these things.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This is John.
Hey, John.
Yeah, I just want to kind of echo that comment. I'm reluctant to ask any questions right now because I don't know where to begin. But I know that once we get involved with this,
right,
I will see something and it'll go click, click, click. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to it, but with a little bit of trepidation.
Yeah, same here.
So how about we give you guys the worksheets, the paper worksheets for the first set of meetings, which is the June 18th meeting. So everybody gets familiar, and because they do, even the worksheet has a different look and feel. Again, just because it's for ease of data entry later on, and then we'll just see where we go from there.
Can I make one more comment?
Of course.
I'm looking at the screen and I can't read anything. I mean, I see Sylvia pointing out things. I could see where her cursor is, but I can't read the numbers. And so any changes that she's making, I have no idea. I can't follow it because I don't see what it is.
Yeah.
And I don't know, is that my fault? Is that my screen or your screen?
I think it's both.
You're looking at a smaller version of this than you see in the software?
Say again?
I said, what Sylvia's showing on the screen now is the fonts are smaller than everything else you see on the screen, because I can flip over and look at the actual software and it's much bigger and more readable.
Oh, okay.
How do I do that? How do I do that?
If you look at the login that you got in your email, just follow that and then it'll take you to the actual software.
Okay, I'll try that.
But John, just to answer your question, in the software program that we're in right now, GoToMeeting, I have it at, I think, 120 visual fonts, but it is smaller. You guys are seeing it smaller. That's just a function of how GoToMeeting works. I didn't make any changes to the numbers. I was just simply saying that we have a worksheet prepared, a paper worksheet that we can give to the committee for the first set of review. And then we'll just go from there. I know it's a work in progress for everybody. We're prepared to do it either way, is what I'm saying.
Well, I think as long as I can see the numbers when we meet in a couple of weeks, as long as I know how to see a printout, not a printout, a display that I can read, that I'm happy. I could probably follow along. But I can't see it right this minute.
Okay.
Okay, we'll wait until next time we'll see. Good.
first, if we have paper sheets in the first meeting and we go, hey, we can make the leap, as opposed to getting in that meeting and go, this isn't working, and then we get behind. Maybe that might be a good way to kick off. Just a thought.
Hello, Michael, could I jump back in?
Of course, Charles.
I was just thinking, again, I hate to keep qualifying this, my newbie status here, but when, like last year, when the budget book is released, is it released en masse? Like we're technically already supposed to have a budget book. Is that the entire budget, or does it get released piecemeal?
It has kind of the framework and a lot of things that we already know going into the year, some things, and then it gets added to as we progress.
Okay. All right. And you hit the key word, and that's where I was going with this whole thing. I'm an engineer by trade, and actually I built software as well. So it's not so much the digital format that's intimidating me. It's the organization and quote unquote the framework. Like you open a book, usually the first place I go is a table of contents to find out, what the book consists of, how it's basically strung together, the storyline, whatever I'm trying to read. So like when it comes to this notion of the budget book and the paper, it's a question for me of getting to see sort of the 10,000 foot view, how what's actually going in, all the pieces and parts, not necessarily the details of each piece and part, but just the general framework of the pieces involved. That would be very useful. So maybe, Michael, to kind of build on what you were saying, if that basic framework potentially could be released, kind of a priori, so guys like me anyway could have some kind of foundation, some basic connection to what to expect and maybe where to migrate to on my own, to jump ahead, and maybe if that's possible to kind of get a pre-read on what's happening as time permits. Anyway, I won't.
No, I think you're right on the money, Charles, and that's what OpenGov's going to give us. So when we're not together and we're working on this, we'll be able to log in and we'll be able to get that global look at how all the pieces are fitting together and what the numbers look like. Right. So basically, we're going to have the whole picture in front of us all the time and be able to see the trends and the different departments and what's going on and how that all fits together. That's my understanding.
Okay. Yes. All yes. Right. So the view that you have right now is the work that we've put into the entire budget. Like I said, there's still some parts and pieces we're still working on as we work through committee and with staff. But to your point, Michael, yes. So here's all of the funds. What isn't here is the capital budget, which again, we're just now building. But you'll be able to open, just like you would in your budget book, you'll be able to open the fund, in this case, the general fund, and be able to see all of the departments. Charles, to your point, you wanted a more global view. There's all of the departments that are in that fund. And then you'll be able to see all of the revenues associated within that fund. So yes, it's a much more global view. Uh-huh. And as recommendations or as the committee, when we meet together and you have questions or you have comments and we need to make changes, as Regine said, the changes are on the fly. And so we're able to do the data entry pretty quickly so that the committee can model and analyze what that change looks like. And if that's something they want to consider, move forward, or abandon altogether.
Okay, all right. I have one more thought, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. This is something that goes back to when I was a hardware engineer, electrical engineer. Something that I got a great amount of value from looking at different pieces of hardware components, ICs, is theory of operation. Do we have anything of the sort? Theory of operation manual in terms of, the knee bone connected to the thigh bone, the big picture on just what strings a Sunset Valley budget together, large scale, high level sort of, just words in terms of describing, I know this is not necessarily has no function to to this open gov system, but just in general, how the city budget comes together, and the basic pieces and parts. Do we have any such document?
I'd have to defer to Regine. Do you have like a flow chart, or Michael, do you have a flow chart or something like that that shows how the budget goes together?
Yeah, that's a tough question because it isn't a nice, pretty model. I'm sorry, Charles, it's all over the place.
It's all right.
It's really not. I mean, and the other ones have been doing this for a while will agree. And I understand why people struggle with it. It is a bear. I don't know, Sylvia. I don't know how you would make that all. I guess we could come up with a flow chart of how all the pieces fit together, but.
Yeah, I'm not looking to give people more work. I was wondering if maybe there was something tucked in the, in the recesses of the historical, vault somewhere that describe. Yeah, right.
And that's scary.
Okay, well, I think
So
I've
Charles, in my mind, this is what you're staring at right now is the sausage making factory.
okay.
Yeah, nobody really wants to know what went in the sausage. And
Right.
I'm the kind of guy that does, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're the kind of guy that built the machinery that even made the sausage. Yeah, so this is, I think there's two parts that are also going to be very important as we move forward, which is one, the cover sheets. And I think it was Mr. Carmona who showed me a budget, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago that had a simple cover sheet and a simple summary. That's sort of the premise for this one, a background on what the fund is, the analysis to the fund, and this is both staff and committee analysis on, hey, we need to watch this, or there's been a trend downward to this, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's also a recommendation moving forward. You must be cautious with, for example, health benefits. You must be cautious with retirement contribution, whatever that recommendation is, and any supporting documents that we want to add, pictures, flow charts, whatever that is. So I think there's some good ingredients going into the sausage already, and hopefully we're just adding to.
Gonna perfect the formula, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you, Sylvia.
I think this would be a challenge if it was just a normal environment for us, right? If it was a normal budget year and we were moving ahead, this would be a challenge for us to make this shift. But now throw in this other variable and it just makes the sausage even a little bit more spicy. But we'll figure it out.
Yeah, Mike.
Terry?
Yeah, I'm confident that we'll figure out too. I agree with you on that. The hardest part of this process for me is not knowing the revenue, not having a good feel for the revenue, and having some kind of proxy somewhere to look at to be able to anticipate. Because for us to stay on, I think we get it done on time, but I'm going to have to do homework prior to us meeting in order to do that.
Yes, you are.
And I'm glad it'll be digital. That'll be nice.
Yeah.
I wish there's some in terms of meeting and starting to make decisions about limiting one department and rewarding another department. That's difficult to do. We basically have to decide, okay, what are the most important things and make sure they're all funding.
Yeah.
And then go from there. It's not easy. So I'm just adding too that just the anxiety, that's bad enough. And then learning a new system.
Teaching old dogs some new tricks.
So Rudy has her hand up.
Rudy? Thank you, Terry. Miss Rosengarten. Going once.
Sorry, it's self-muted. I heard all your comments and I lived it, so I understand, because I used to show up at council with a full packet of papers, and I had younger council members to the left and right of me coming with their laptop, and I was embarrassed. And eventually I just used a USB stick with papers and weaned myself off, and eventually I didn't need the USB stick or the papers. So you will find that it'll be easier and less clutter in your home when you get away from the papers.
Someone did recognize me.
But I will admit, the first year that we
Somebody
thought
was
we
trying to
were going
make
to
me
be digital,
Yeah.
and then Michael, you said, well, I need paper because I can't move fast enough from screen to screen. We're talking the budget. I was like, oh, thank you, Michael, thank you. Because that would be hard to look at a small screen and flip as fast as we do in our budget books.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. And then for Charles, if you go to the sunsetvalley.org page, go to city budget. It's on the yellow tabs on the left, and then open up FY 1920 budget. You can then see the whole process we did. There's the mayor's letter, the budget summary, and then each tab and what they refer to. And that's what we do. We go tab. We may not go in order of tab 1, tab 2, tab 3. We go in whatever order that is done already as far as the city staff who provided the information. But that gives you a great idea of what we did. Okay, that's it.
Okay, very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Rudy.
Councilmember Gonzalez has her hand up.
Melissa,
Hey there, am I audible?
you are.
Great, thank you. I just want to go ahead and there was to answer Charles Goyette's question, I went searching through my email, and before Clay took off, he did a new council person packet. And some of the links aren't hot anymore, but they all explain all the funds, all the things. And so it's like for a new council, but I think it would be good for the city as a whole. So I'm going to forward the links that are worthwhile of this to the city administrator, and then people maybe on the budget process, like Charles, who want to see descriptions of the bones and everything, can see it, because it would be what would happen for a new council member. And I think everybody could potentially be a new council member, and so they might want to see this. So I'm going to pass this on, but it does kind of give the bones of the city to someone who wants to figure things out, and the bones of the budget. And I think there was also a whole presentation, because I got tired of hearing Charles's question. And so I'm pretty sure that there was a city council meeting, if I can find that has it all laid out to exactly that end. And it probably was fairly early on in my budget tenure, but I will find it and I will forward it, because it does exist. Anyway, that's it. I'll just get it for y'all. Bye-bye. Have fun.
Thank you. And Charles Goyette, I'm happy to give you my old book. I have a couple of those. I don't know why I'm keeping those. I'm a sick man, but I'm happy to meet with you and hand you off a couple of budget books, and you can peruse away. Sylvia, is that the bulk of your presentation?
Yes, Councilmember Reeds has her hand up.
Okay, yes, I've already gotten into this and started to open up these spreadsheets and started having a little fun with this. The one thing I really love for all the members that have been around for a while is that on that spreadsheet, when you open up the spreadsheet, you put your cursor over the description, and it gives you, you can have a whole paragraph of descriptor right there, and you can read it and understand. And before, we would have to go and shuffle our papers throughout the back of the section to find what is the descriptor, what was it about. And so this makes it so nice. I love that aspect of it. So the other question I had, Sylvia, was that our headers are like fiscal year 16. I'm assuming that means 15, 16. Is that what that means?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
So I wanted to touch on Terry's comments about revenues. And so we've made some initial revenue projections as a staff, and you'll see we did about a 25% reduction in administration in the general fund. Municipal court is down a little bit more than 46%, and that's simply caseload. That's simply not being able to meet. That's simply folks not being able to pay, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a small decrease in general government, and as we jump into the other funds, they don't really have a whole lot of revenues. But we did have this discussion in terms of this particular area. We do have some discussion to talk about, like I said earlier, on the hot fund. And this is the sheet I think that's going to be the most in flux as we receive sales tax and things. And I want to go back to the point that you made about essential versus non-essential. And I think it's going to be the committee's charge to do essential, and then the council's going to have to come back and decide based on committee work, right? Essential plus what does that mean? Yeah. And so what I think what we're going to do in terms of I know is, as I stated before, I've been working with Carolyn on a rudimentary cost of service sheet that at least outlines, if we say we want to add something, what is that impact to both people, to both equipment and materials, and then also in terms of salary and overall overhead. So I really want us to be working from a place of fact and data and defense for all of us to be transparent, because we really need to be having those conversations about, well, if this was a free service before, but maybe we might need to pay $5 or $10 or et cetera, to balance the budget and or still receive the service. Those are all good and honest conversations to have.
Thank you, Sylvia. So Terry, along the lines of what you mentioned, I think this is a good segue, and it kind of goes back to what we talked about first. How do we approach this, and what would that methodology look like? Because we don't know what that revenue number is going to be, right? And we do know that it's going to be, and how do we as a committee to just randomly decide, okay, you stay, you go? It seems somewhat arbitrary and capricious. And so a more methodical approach would be to define those things. And we say, okay, as I said earlier, for example, let's just say we broke expenses up into several categories, 3 categories. And we said, okay, these are the essential things. This is public works, water, right? Trash. This is police, this is admin. These are the things we know we need to have. What would that number be? If we stripped everything away and said we just need to keep the city going, what would that number be? And I'm just throwing this out there for the conversation. And so that's one number, right? We say, okay, well, that's everything aside, that's what that bare bottom number is. And the next tier might be those things that we provide: landscape services, fixing potholes, I don't know, things that fall into that somewhat necessary but not critical services, right? Essential. And then those things that are at the top that are things like, we always poke fun at council food and library cards. So those things we can continue to poke at it. But that's an idea, that's a concept of things that might float in that top tier. Okay, these are nice things, but we could probably get by without a library card or council food. And then all the things that revolve around that. Some things that we kicked the can down the road this year on contributions to capital improvements, repair and replacement, right? And so we pushed that out. And by doing that again, it really puts us in we're making the can even bigger going down the road. So those are the things that might be, okay, as a committee, we want to put those things in along with essentials. Anyway, it's just formulating some thought process as we progress through the different committees, different departments of what we as a committee finance, and we make our decisions based solely on some criteria that we develop as a group and say, it's going to be, here's the core. We all were in agreement, we're going to fund the core. And what's the next step look? And where does the money run out? Right.
So Michael, what public with what planning and environmental did and public works did is they went and ranked their project by order of priority, right? And as we have a budget that starts coming back online, one of the things I hear over and over is, where did we get that number? Where does staff, how much does staff cost? How much is et cetera, et cetera? So what we did is just, and again, this is the first pass at a cost of service. So for example, mulch delivery per delivery. So the cost of service is divided into minutes, how many minutes it takes each person who touches it. And so I hope to have 3 things come out of this. 1, a standard operating procedure, so I even know what it takes to do mulch delivery. 2, how much it has actually cost us. And here we have an estimate of $58. And this is based on all of these folks touching it. This is based on the equipment. And I haven't even added city overhead in terms of payroll and those kinds of things. And I know I'm at a $58 amount. So when I come to the ranking that both planning and environmental and staff has put together, as we look at things moving forward and we want to add, I need to be able to say, okay, guys, those things cost this much, and they also are going to equal an amount of staff of this amount. And we have to have those conversations moving forward before we do any add plus, as you talked about. If we're doing essential first, we got to know what those other non-essentials cost if we're talking about moving them forward. So I'm hoping to bring a much more comprehensive understanding of those kinds of budget things to the committees and back to this committee, because I know you guys get it. The other committees aren't necessarily used to working in the level of detail in numbers that you guys are.
Could we, just presenting that idea that we break these into some sort of categories. Can you, Sylvia, go back? I know you can, you and Regine, and say, okay, guys, here's that core number, right? Here's the lights. Here's the insurance. Here's salaries. All those core things that we say we have in place right now. Here's the people. We're not changing the employee number. Here's what that number is. All the buildings, all the insurance, the gas for the police cars, gas for as tight as we could make it, and say, okay, here's what we think that core number looks like in terms of expense.
We could. I'm going to let Regine. I hear Regine yelling something over there. Regine?
I'm going to miss that woman.
Regine?
So I think the admin and court will be, that's an easy thing, because there's not too much on there that isn't core, but there are a few things. Public works will be a little harder because they have all the services and the projects, and so but I think the committees have ranked those, so I don't think it'll be a hard a hard number to get.
Yeah, I think the hard part's going to be that transition from 2 to 3, and how we move them up and down in there. That's going to be the tough part. Terry, you're muted.
May we have access to the rankings of Public Works and Planning Environmental, because I know they're putting a lot of time in on that, and I know that they're getting feedback from citizens in terms of their rankings.
Oh, sure. I would think, yeah, they give direction to the committee, to this committee, right? How that individual committee sees their priorities up and down that spectrum. Sure. I think we have to see that.
Well, they've been posted in the committee agenda for the last 2 months, and then they were posted in the council packet this past week. So nothing's changed. They're still working off of that. What the committee now has asked of staff is for staff to come forward with their recommendation, because I think the committee said anything above 40, tell me what that looks like. And then Carolyn made comment that some things didn't make the list, but they're also important. So the committee asked for staff recommendation to do that. And that's that back and forth that I keep talking about, that, yeah, we might be super excited about a program coming back, but weighted against what is essential and then weighted against what a community expects, That's the fine line that we're all going to be walking in the next couple of months.
Yeah. Terry?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up. Yeah, I think your suggestion of simplifying it into 3 tiers is great, and it would be really good if we could feed back to the committee that they group their rankings perhaps in a 1, 2, 3 format, what they think are essential and what they think are amenities, and then what they think, you know, there would be like the top of the mark kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Instead of going like from 1 to 10, just say, okay, guys, what's that core thing you can't live without, right? Where are those things in the middle, and what's the stuff? All right, we can live without more flowers or whatever that might be, right? And that helps us say, well, they really feel okay. Let's see if we can plug that in to make this work.
Yep.
Yeah, it allows us to get more, in effect, more citizen input.
Absolutely.
Into this as we think this through. And I'm going to make this is just a pitch, that fixing that damn lift station and the water quality funds be essentials, the water quality facilities be essential expenses. Oh, that's all. Enough said.
So that's sort of my idea about a bronze level budget, which is just the initial everything that we need. A silver budget, which is everything we need plus a little bit more, and then a gold budget, which maybe would put back some extra things that are, as Terry said, nice to have. So.
Yeah. Of course, as you point out, Terry, a lot of this is going to be based on what we come back with in terms of a budget number, right? I mean, that's going to cap it ultimately. The core has to go in there. The contributions has to go in there, I think. Okay, well, what's left? And so we just keep pulling down on that number. Trying to fit in that last bit's going to really be a challenge.
Yeah, what this allows us to do, and I'm getting kind of excited now because I think I'm feeling more like this is actually doable. And in a way that really that reflects the wishes of the citizens. Yeah. I think it's doable and reflect that what their wishes are, and so that sounds exciting.
You know, we hear that a lot, and I always want to remind people, well, who are we? We are the citizens, and the committees, they're citizens, and all those people are engaged, and we want to hear it from everybody, but let's not discount those people that are citizens that are involved, right? And so what they think is important is something we should pay attention to. So.
Absolutely.
All right.
I'd like to just say my piece.
I'm sorry, Charles. Then going away, Sylvia, then you guys can pull together that core number for us. So when we get back together, we can look at that to start with.
Yes.
Wanda, any thoughts?
No, I do. I like that idea. I totally supportive of that. And yeah, I am. I'm excited too.
It's a sad day when you're excited about budgets.
That's my life right now, huh?
That says something about this committee. We all need to get together and drink a beer. What we need to do.
And I will say, I'm looking forward to being able to meet again as a group and not, on this online. So
yeah, I'm missing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're social creatures, and I think we're all feeling that.
I am.
Yeah. Can we have beer at the first meeting?
Yes.
Can we take that out of council food? That work, John? All right.
Charles had his hand up. I don't know if Charles Goyette, you.
Oh, Charles, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I was just, in terms of the Public Works Department, or the committee rather, and what they did, it was, ranking projects. It wasn't so much, a lot of what else the Public Works Department provides in terms of services. Sylvia hit on something that I wanted to talk about earlier in terms of, and again, I don't know what we have presently that's available, but just the cost of service. And, and for people to, to create this, gold standard, silver standard, bronze, I mean, I think it helps to know how much different things would cost, and that could affect what one would put ahead of another based upon that piece of information as well. But it seems like, just we essentially have like 3 categories, I think, that we can fit these pieces into, right? Because there's projects, and those projects are, to a large degree, they got boundaries on them, right? They're self-sustaining type of things. We can do it or not do it. We have infrastructure costs, right, that have maintenance associated with it that has to be quantified. And we have services that we provide, and some services may not be deemed terribly important, or we don't have the money to afford. But if we know how much they cost to provide, then we have the information we need to put it all in context, right? So, those, and I don't know what we presently have quantified in that regard, like in terms of service costs and such. And I was also curious too, looking at the, at the budget report, or the, whatever that thing is, that independent report, in terms of, do we have like numbers that are hard coded, if you will, or bounded to the different departments in terms of what each department costs in terms of the service, and I don't even know if this is practical again, but the service that the various departments provide and the cost for those services, if we have that kind of information as well. Thank you.
So we're just now building that information, and in all honesty, when the budget was being built, Regine was provided the information by the department heads after they had their committee discussion. She wasn't always privy to that, quite often not privy to it. So we're now going back and sort of dissecting some of those based on a lot of, again, conversation about, well, where did that number come from? That seems too high, or why would you do that? So I'm hoping that our rudimentary sheets do that. That we end up with an SOP, we end up with the cost, and then we end up with a priority.
The other thought too is, this is just a moment in time, I think, and based on what we know now, that as we slowly recover, it's just the next year or two, if things keep moving, and we'll get back into a regular rhythm. Some of these things we can then refund and add them back to the budget. So I don't think it's the end, that things are never going to come back again. It's just that right now, where we are, we're going to have to continue to tighten our belt up to make, because when we get to the other side of this, we're going to want to replenish the reserve, right? So it depends on how much that we want to burn through next year. If we get to X and we say, no, we really need to have more, okay, well, now we supplement the reserve, right? If we just say, okay, we only have one amount coming in, but we really have to have expenses of this, we make up the difference with the burn out of the reserve, which is one process that we could implement. That when we finish, we then need to go back and replenish that reserve. And so we're looking at 3, 4, 5 years of a kind of a ripple effect, if you think that all the way through in terms of what we're going to do. And we won't know any of that until we get to the end of the budget.
So an opportunity to become very organized in terms of being accountable for all the nickels and dimes.
Yeah, we get better all the time.
Well, we got to spin this positively somehow, right? I mean, it's a pretty dire situation. So all the goodness we can apply to this, the better.
As long as we have beer at the first meeting, we'll be good.
Yeah.
All right, you clowns. What else do we need to cover?
Whether or not to adjourn.
Is that a motion, Mr. John?
Oh, okay. I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Goyette. All in favor?
Aye.
We have to do a roll call, Sylvia, really?
No, you're good.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you.
How do I get out of here?
I'm gonna end it. I'm gonna
Release